Imagine waking up one morning and hearing rain outside your shelter. At first, nobody is worried. Rain is normal. The forest needs it, the rivers need it, and the plants need it. But then the rain continues the next day, and the day after that. Soon 1 week has passed, then 2 weeks, then 3. And now imagine something almost impossible for us today. 30 straight days of rain. No dry clothes, no dry ground, no supermarket, no electricity, no weather forecast, no comfortable house waiting for you, just a small shelter, a struggling fire, limited food, and an entire world slowly turning into mud. So what would ancient humans actually do if the rain refused to stop for a whole month? On day 1, the rain would probably not cause panic. Ancient humans were familiar with changing weather, and they knew that rain could be useful. The group would simply move into a protected shelter, perhaps a cave, rock overhang, or temporary hut made from branches, grass, bark, and animal hides. The first priority would be protecting the fire. Someone would gather whatever dry wood remained nearby and bring it under cover. Others would check the roof for leaks and make sure sleeping areas stayed relatively dry. Everyone would expect the storm to end soon. Nobody would know that this was only the beginning. By day 2, the ground around the shelter would already be noticeably wetter. Paths that were easy to walk yesterday would become slippery and muddy. The group would probably avoid unnecessary travel. Instead of spending energy walking through heavy rain, they would stay close to the shelter. Children would remain protected inside, while adults worked on the fire, repaired tools, prepared food, and reinforced weak parts of the shelter. The rain would still feel like an inconvenience rather than a disaster. By day 3, things would begin to change. Dry firewood would become harder to find. Anything left outside would be soaked. The group would start searching for wood under trees, inside natural gaps, or anywhere protected from the rain. They might also collect bark, dry grass, or other materials that could help keep a fire burning. The fire would now be treated like a precious resource. A single careless mistake could mean losing their main source of heat and cooking. On day 4, hunting would become more difficult. Heavy rain could reduce visibility, make tracks harder to read, and change animal behavior. Some animals might hide, while others move toward different areas. Instead of traveling far, the group might depend more heavily on whatever food they already had. Dried meat, nuts, seeds, roots, and other stored foods would suddenly become extremely valuable. Ancient humans could not simply replace their supplies with a trip to the nearest store. What they had was what they had. By day 5, the shelter would need serious attention. Rain falling continuously on a roof made from natural materials could slowly create leaks. Water might begin dripping into sleeping areas. The ground could become soft and muddy. The group would have to repair the roof, move sleeping places, and perhaps dig small channels around the shelter to direct water away. These simple engineering decisions could make the difference between staying relatively comfortable and spending the night lying in cold mud. By day 6, everyone would be getting tired of the same sound: rain. There would be no clear sky, no dry forest floor, and very little opportunity to travel. But humans have an advantage that many animals don't. They can create work even when the environment prevents them from hunting. People could make or repair stone tools, sharpen wooden weapons, process animal hides, repair clothing, create ropes, prepare food, and teach younger members useful skills. A long period inside the shelter could become a time for learning and preparation. Then came day 7. 1 full week had passed. Normally, a week of rain might seem like an extreme event, but ancient humans have experienced different climates and seasonal patterns. Their survival depended on understanding their environment. They would begin asking an important question: is this just a long storm, or is something more serious happening? The group would watch the river, the hills, the animals in the surrounding landscape. If the water was rising, staying in the same place might become dangerous. On day 8, food would become a bigger concern. The group would begin rationing what remained. They might eat smaller portions and prioritize foods that provided the most energy. Hunting parties could still attempt short trips when the weather allowed, but every journey carried risk. A swollen stream could suddenly become impossible to cross. A muddy slope could cause someone to fall. Getting lost in heavy rain could turn a simple food search into a life-threatening situation. By day 9, the shelter would begin to smell different. Everything would be damp. Wet animal hides, muddy ground, smoke, and human bodies trapped inside a small space would create an unpleasant environment. Yet, the group would have little choice. Staying together would provide warmth and safety. People would probably sleep close to one another, especially during cold nights, while someone kept watch over the fire. On day 10, the group had survived 10 days without seeing normal dry conditions. This is where preparation would really matter. Groups with stored food, strong shelters, good fire-making skills, and knowledge of the local environment would have a much better chance. Humans didn't survive because every day was easy. They survived because knowledge accumulated over generations. Older members of the group could remember previous storms and know which locations were safer, where food could be found, and which rivers became dangerous. On day 11, the rain might begin to affect the animals around them. Some creatures might move to higher ground, others might seek shelter. Predators might also change their behavior. For ancient humans, these changes could provide clues. The natural world was essentially their information system. They didn't have satellites or weather radar, so they watched everything. Animal movement, river levels, wind direction, clouds, and changes in plants could all provide useful information. On day 12, the group might attempt to collect more food from nearby areas. Instead of hunting large animals, they could focus on easier opportunities. Certain plants, roots, insects, shellfish, or other local food sources could become important depending on the environment. Humans were opportunistic eaters. If one food source disappeared temporarily, they could switch to another. This flexibility was one of their greatest advantages. By day 13, the fire would become even more important. Wet wood produces smoke and burns poorly. The group would need to carefully manage the fuel. They might place damp wood near the fire to slowly dry it before using it. They could also protect the hottest part of the fire and use small amounts of dry material to keep the flames alive. Fire was not something they could take for granted. It required constant attention. On day 14, 2 weeks had passed. The group had now spent half a month surrounded by rain. Children might become restless, adults might become frustrated, but storytelling and social interaction could help. People could tell stories about ancestors, animals, dangerous places, successful hunts, and past storms. These weren't simply ways to pass time. Stories could preserve information and teach younger members how to survive. Then came day 15. Half the month was gone, but the rain was still falling. The biggest danger might no longer be the rain itself. It could be the consequences of the rain. Rivers might be higher, paths might disappear, food could become harder to find, shelters could weaken, insects and other organisms could become more common. The group would need to constantly monitor these changes. By day 16, the ground around the shelter might be almost impossible to keep dry. The people could raise sleeping areas using branches or other materials. They might move the fire to a slightly higher and safer location. If the shelter was built on poor ground, the group could begin considering relocation, but moving during continuous rain would be extremely risky, so they would probably avoid it unless staying became more dangerous. On day 17, someone might notice something important. The river has risen significantly. This could change everything. Ancient humans understood that water could be both life-giving and deadly. A river that was safe to cross 2 weeks ago could now become a powerful, unpredictable current. The group would avoid unnecessary crossings and keep away from low-lying areas. By day 18, food supplies could become critically important. If the group had been successful at preserving food before the storm, those supplies might now be saving their lives. This is one reason food preservation was such an important development in human history. Drying, smoking, roasting, and other techniques allowed food to survive longer than fresh meat or plants. Preparation before bad weather could determine what happened during it. On day 19, the group might begin repairing almost everything they own. Wet conditions could damage clothing,
tools, baskets, ropes, hides, and weapons. A broken tool during normal weather was inconvenient. During a month-long storm, it could become a serious problem. People would use the sheltered time to repair and remake whatever they could. Then came day 20. 20 days of rain. At this point, the group would understand that this was no ordinary storm. The shelter might be surrounded by standing water. Some plants could begin growing rapidly because of the moisture, while others could be damaged. Animals would continue adapting to the changing environment. The humans would have to do the same.
On day 21, the group would likely become extremely careful about where they walked. Mud can hide holes, sharp objects, unstable ground, and dangerous water. A simple injury could become much more serious when everyone is wet and food is limited. Avoiding accidents would be just as important as finding food. By day 22, the group might finally consider leaving their current shelter if conditions continued deteriorating. But moving an entire group is complicated. Children need protection. Food and tools must be carried. Fire must somehow be preserved or restarted. The new location must be safe, and nobody knows what lies beyond the familiar area. Staying might be dangerous, but moving might be dangerous too. On day 23, they would carefully inspect the landscape. Higher ground would become more attractive. A cave or rock shelter could suddenly be extremely valuable. Areas near rivers or steep slopes would be avoided. Humans were constantly making decisions based on risk, even if they didn't have modern words for concepts like flood zones or structural failure. By day 24, exhaustion would become a major factor. 24 days of wet conditions would wear down even a well-prepared group. People would have to conserve energy. There would be less unnecessary movement. Every task would have a purpose: finding food, protecting the fire, repairing shelter, caring for children, or monitoring danger. On day 25, something fascinating might happen. The group could begin noticing signs that the environment was changing again. Maybe the rain was becoming lighter for short periods. Maybe the wind direction had shifted. Perhaps birds and other animals were becoming more active. Ancient humans were experts at noticing small environmental clues because their survival depended on them. By day 26, hope would begin returning if the weather showed signs of improvement. But the group couldn't celebrate yet. The ground was still wet. Rivers could remain dangerous even after rainfall weakened. A shelter damaged by weeks of rain could collapse suddenly. The people would remain cautious. On day 27, the group might begin preparing for the moment they could finally leave the shelter. They would organize tools, inspect weapons, prepare food, repair clothing, and check the surrounding area. If the weather improved, they would need to move quickly to take advantage of new opportunities. Animals might become active again. Plants could provide fresh food, and dry materials would eventually become available. Then came day 30. 30 days, an entire month of rain. For modern humans, 30 days of continuous rain would be frustrating and unusual, but for ancient humans, it could be a genuine survival challenge. They would have needed shelter, fire, food, clothing, environmental knowledge, cooperation, and most importantly, adaptability. They couldn't control the weather. They couldn't make the rain stop. They couldn't simply escape into a heated building. But they could adapt. They could reinforce their shelter. They could protect their fire. They could preserve food. They could ration supplies. They could repair their tools. They could teach their children. They could watch the rivers. They could read the behavior of animals. And if necessary, they could move. That's the incredible thing about ancient humans. They weren't the strongest animals on Earth. They weren't the fastest. They didn't have claws, thick fur, or enormous bodies. Their greatest advantage was their ability to cooperate, remember, learn, and change their behavior when the environment changed. 30 days of rain would have been brutal. Some groups might not survive such extreme conditions, especially if flooding, cold, hunger, or disease became severe. But groups that were prepared, lived in suitable environments, and had strong social cooperation had a much better chance. And when the clouds finally disappeared, the ancient humans would step outside. The fire could be rebuilt, the shelter could be repaired, food could be gathered again, the hunt could begin again,
and life would continue. Because ancient humans didn't survive by waiting for nature to become easier, they survived by becoming better at living in a world they could never completely control. So the next time rain starts falling outside your window, imagine turning off the electricity, losing your heating, emptying your refrigerator, and walking outside with nothing but a simple shelter, a small fire, and the people around you. One rainy day would be difficult, one rainy week would be dangerous, but 30 days? That would be a true test of survival. And somehow, generation after generation, our ancestors kept adapting, kept learning, and kept moving forward.